When I caught a whiff. A scent so fresh, so life-changing, I had to find its source. I didn't know if you were the woman in the pink freshly washed cardigan or the retired mailman next to me, but I knew one of you was my soulmate. Ah, the scent of Gain Flings. Add Gain scent beads for an even longer-lasting scent.
Hurry into the Energy Savings Event at Lowe's. Save energy and save money on select major appliances, including Whirlpool energy-efficient appliances. You can also use less water with WaterSense bathroom faucets, starting at just $19.98. Plus, find other great energy-saving items throughout the store, and check your eligibility for rebates in your area to save even more. Don't miss the Energy Savings Event at Lowe's. Selection varies by location. Exclusions apply. Visit Lowe's.com for details. Valid through 9/28.
Here's Ted on traffic.
As we look around the Bay Area, we are not seeing much in the way of slowdowns right now, which is good news if you do have somewhere you need to be, but it's been very quiet since we had a busy start back in the 5 o'clock hour, but now we are not seeing any signs of slowing anywhere. Get traffic 24/7 on our Twitter feed at KCBS AM/FM Traffic from the traffic leader, KCBS.
And it's going to be nice today, sunny, temperatures in the 70s and 80s. On the 8th on KCBS.
Heard my little sis is buying a car.
Already used Capital One Auto Navigator. I found my car online and got pre-qualified instantly.
Okay.
Capital One, what's in your wallet?
Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/Auto Navigator. 5 stars. All rise for To Kill a Mockingbird. Unmissable and unforgettable. A Mockingbird for our moment. Beautiful, elegiac, satisfying, even exhilarating. A New York Times critic's pick. Mockingbird is now the most successful American play in Broadway history. All rise for Aaron Sorkin's great play. Richard Thomas is Atticus Finch in Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Now playing at the Golden Gate Theater. For tickets, visit BroadwaySF.com.
News that matters to you. Around the Bay, around the world, around the clock. All news 106.9 and AM 740. KCBS.
Sunday, September 25th, 2022. I'm Eric Thomas.
And I'm Jennifer Hodges.
Time now for KCBS In Depth.
You're listening to KCBS In Depth.
Really, in order to find quality care, you often have to be on a wait list that's months long.
The people, places, and issues the Bay Area is talking about.
The aggressive advocates who were looking to overrule Roe for so long, they really had no idea of the consequences they might be opening up.
In this case, there very well may be charges that are appropriate. For example, trying to obstruct the official proceeding of Congress, right? That is unlawful.
This is KCBS In Depth.
The sheer scale of the nation's mental health crisis can feel overwhelming, but there are steps that we can all take to confront it. Sometimes it's as simple as listening. Welcome to KCBS In Depth, broadcasting throughout the Bay Area and streaming on the Odyssey app. I'm Keith Manconi. Today we're going to bring you a portion of the I'm Listening program that aired this past week. That's a 1-hour special dedicated to raising awareness about mental health and ending stigma through conversation. Up ahead, we'll be hearing stories of health crisis and community resilience from right here in the Bay Area.
And the millisecond my hands left that rail, it was an instant regret for my action.
And we'll also be getting some expert advice on how we can all do a better job of offering support to those in a moment of crisis.
So if you're worried about someone in your life, talk to them ahead of time. Be explicit.
I hosted the special KCBS colleague Melissa Colruz, who we'll be hearing from in a second. We're going to start off the program now speaking with our special guest for the hour, Meredith Sears. She's a clinical psychologist specializing in suicide prevention for the San Francisco VA. She also serves as the president of the board for the Greater Bay Area chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention.
Welcome, Meredith, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, to get us started this hour, Meredith, a few questions for you. We've been living with this pandemic and all of the many crises that surround it for more than 2 years now, and we've discussed in years past on this program about the many ways that has all added up to make the mental health crisis worse. People really have been struggling patience from folks out there. How are people coping now in 2022? Are people beginning to find their footing?
I think a lot of people are beginning to find their footing. A lot of people have been accessing mental health care who never have before. A lot of people are starting to reconnect with their communities as in-person events start to go live again. At the same time, I think we're surprised by how difficult it is to get back into the swing of things. I think being at home and isolated for 2+ years has created a lot of anxiety about going back to normal and what that might look like. And so what I'm seeing is the need for mental health care continues to be very high. A lot of people are still struggling with anxiety and depression and difficulty readjusting to a new normal.
Meredith, your organization is hosting a series of awareness and solidarity events around the issues of mental health and suicide prevention. These are known as Out of the Darkness Walks. There was one in San Francisco about a week and a half ago. Another one is set for Oakland next month. Can you tell us a bit about them and the message that's behind them?
Absolutely. AFSP runs these walks every fall, and they're designed to raise awareness about mental health and suicide prevention, help support loss survivors who have lost a loved one to suicide, help support people who have lived experience of suicidal thoughts or past suicidal behavior, reduce stigma around talking about suicide. One of the hopes of the AFSP walks is that people will feel more comfortable reaching out for help. Loved ones will feel more comfortable asking about thoughts of suicide and about mental health concerns when they're worried about someone that they care about, and ultimately funding better research in suicide prevention and being able to find new and creative ways to reduce suicide rates and improve mental health care for the population at large.
You brought up those twin goals of about mental health and reducing the stigma. And interestingly, just based on the very narrow lens that I have, helping to host this show every year, I really get the sense that we are making some progress on both those fronts. Curious, Meredith Sears, are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, that there really is some progress happening?
Absolutely. And I think what I look to is the different kinds of outcome variables that we want to see shift if we can reduce stigma and if we can increase people's willingness to talk about mental health, right? Because itself is not a useful task. The reason we want to reduce stigma and the reason we want people to be more comfortable talking about mental health is because we want people who struggle with mental health conditions to reach out for help. We want them to access care that's actually going to improve their mental health and reduce anxiety, depression, and whatever other symptoms they're experiencing. And I do see many, many more people accessing mental health care, especially over the last few years. We're also seeing much more intense mental health concerns across the board. Some estimates are suggesting that we're seeing increased anxiety and depression up to 40% of the population relative to what used to be kind of a standard 10% of the population experiencing anxiety and depression at a level that was really bothering them at any given time. So I think both we're seeing more willingness to talk about mental health, more awareness that mental health is important and that we need to take care of ourselves and our mental health. And unfortunately, we're also seeing increased need for those services at the same time.
All right. Well, speaking once again this hour to Meredith Sears with the Greater Bay Area chapter of the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Continuing our program now, we're going to go on to our first story of mental health challenge and community support. And a quick heads up that these stories do make references to suicides.
Keith, we've been talking about the ways in which we as a society now are beginning to take mental health and mental health care more seriously. One of the biggest examples of that from this past year has been the rollout of a new national emergency number created specifically to help people experiencing mental crisis.
The number is 988. Similar to the concept of 911, except this new number will put callers in touch with trained counselors ready to offer talk support or other mental health resources. Our own Kathy Novak got a first-hand look at how this program is rolling out in the Bay Area, and she joins us to tell us about it. Kathy, welcome to the program.
Hi, Keith and Melissa. Well, 988 is a national service.
area number, you'll be connected with a counselor at a local center who has gone through extensive training on how to handle crisis calls. And we thought a good way to get a better idea of how this all works was for me to actually do some of that training. Here's how it went.
I bought a rope. I don't know how thick or thin it was supposed to be, but I got a pretty long rope.
This is not a real phone call. Training manager Daniela Bermudez is playing the role of someone who has dialed 988 for support.
I've been taking it in and out, kind of messing with it, and it's been stressing me out, and I don't know, I just thought I wanted to call somebody. I hear that you're trying to look after yourself and protect yourself by reaching out for support. That's really great that you did that.
That's me trying to put some of what Daniela has taught me into practice.
And it sounds like you're kind of messing with this rope, and you mentioned that that's stressing you out, so I wonder, would it be okay if maybe we put the rope in another room? I guess I could do that.
In this scenario, the person who has called is at a high risk for suicide, and my goal is to intervene in this crisis and make sure they're safe. Suicide prevention has been at the core of the work that crisis support services.
Just in the past couple months alone, we've noticed a 30% increase in call volume.
That's Executive Director Narja Sahori Dillon. She explains that jump in calls started when CSS became one of 200 local crisis centers across the country, 13 of them in California, that answer calls made to the 988 lifeline. And they're for anyone who is having a mental. Most of the calls they get are not from people who are having suicidal thoughts.
We get a lot of calls between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. during a time where maybe we can't call up our natural support, our friends or family, or there's not a place that we can just pop into to feel connected.
And just being there to pick up the phone can help. But I have no background in mental health. And as I get a taste of the extensive training required of the volunteers who take these calls, training manager Daniela asks how I feel going into it.
One of the things I'd be most concerned about is not being able to stop someone, if they're thinking about suicide or making it worse somehow.
That's a very valid concern, and that's why I was saying on day one, people are like, how am I going to do this?
Definitely don't take the calls on day one, and there are always licensed clinicians on hand. And Executive Director Narja Sahori Dillon says CSS deliberately has a model of bringing volunteers in from the community.
There's a ton of research showing the value of community-based support, especially for people who might be hesitant around help seeking. Knowing that the people on the other side are community members who care is actually a way that they feel like they belong.
Daniela Bermudez explains it's not just about running down a checklist of questions.
And especially when it comes to assessing for suicide or even asking people questions, we really want to think about it as, tell us about you. Tell us how you got here. Tell us what's going on. We want to know about our callers. We want to know their story.
In that sense, maybe news reporters and journalists are good people to volunteer for these lines, because that's what we do all day.
There you go. Yeah, we're always we're taking rolling applications if you want to be a volunteer.
So bringing the conversation back into the studio now, Kathy, one thing that you said that really stood out to me, and it's probably because of what all of us do for a living, is you made the comparison between having these kinds of conversations and being a journalist in which you interview people all the time. What was the striking difference between our work and what you learned in this training?
Yeah, Melissa, I'm still not an expert in mental health, so I will say that at the outset, and that this is all what I personally took out of the training. But we heard from training manager Daniela Bermudez there about how it really is all about knowing someone's story. And what I gather, what I've experienced personally, is that when you're having a tough time mentally, it really does mean so much for someone to just listen and for you to feel like you're being heard. So asking open questions was a big part of this training. There's stuff in there about affirmation, reflective listening, and as a journalist, what I took from that was listen to what people are saying, ask follow-up questions. It's the kind of skills that are involved in good interviewing. So that was sort of unexpected for me, and maybe it demonstrates what Narja Sahori Dillon meant about having volunteers bring